Yo, what's up guys, it's Technological back here, and today in this video we'll be covering up all the basics of Git and GitHub. We'll learn how to install Git on the machine and then how to configure it with the VS Code. Whatever we code will be uploaded to our Git repository on the real time, and you don't need to do much of a work. Everything will be done through the command line. So these are some of the basic tools that you need to learn. So without wasting much time, let's get started. So the things that we are going to cover in this video include setting Git on your machine, setting up your profile linked with your machine. Then we will learn how to connect the repository that we have created on our profile to a folder that's present on our machine. And then lastly, we'll cover up how you are supposed to push all the files that are on your local machine to your GitHub repository, which is the remote destination. So for that, let's start with this folder Java, which I've created a couple of hours ago. We have one file here, that's a Java file prog1. So now we need a repository to target where we'll be pushing all our content. So we'll simply head up and create a new repository. Let the repository name be Java. I'm not adding any description, I'm not adding a readme file. Now one thing you need to know here, if you add a readme file, your default branch will be main. And if you don't add one, your default branch is going to be master. So those of you who are confused why your branch is automatically getting set to master, this is the reason. So I'll proceed with the basic method. We'll go ahead with master and we'll create a repository. That's it. The repository is ready. We have a link to our Git. Basically, this is not our repository. Without the .git extension, this is the destination to our repo. So on the repo, you basically see all the basics that you need to know. So firstly, you need to initialize an empty Git. You need to add a readme file. You need to add commit. You need to push files and all the basic stuff. But you don't need to get it so complicated. I have already created a repo that you can follow for all the basic instructions. The first method is installation of Git. So for that, you'll have to install Git Bash on your PC. The link is given here. You can definitely search it up on Google and get it installed. So head up to the Git website and then download the standalone installer. Probably it's going to be 64-bit for most of you. After downloading, simply run the installation setup and proceed with the installation. Let everything be on default, no need to adjust anything. And with that, the installation of Git is complete. Disable the release notes and finish. So we are done with the installation of Git. Next step is to install GitHub Desktop. So simply download the setup for GitHub Desktop, and once the download is complete, simply run the file and have GitHub Desktop installed on your PC. The installation for GitHub Desktop application is really simple. You just click on the setup and everything is done on its own. Once installed, you just need to sign into your GitHub profile. For that, simply hit the sign in button and continue with the profile that you wish to continue. After that, it will ask you to configure Git. So use your GitHub account name and email address. Let the username be as it is and configure the email to be the correct one, and then hit finish. And with that, you have GitHub Desktop set up on your PC. You have literal access to all the repositories that are present on your profile. You can download any one of them, place them on your machine and start making changes to it. And once the changes are done, you can literally push it back up to the repo. So we'll come to that later. So now we are basically done for the installation of Git Bash and the installation of GitHub Desktop app. Both these are done. Now we can move on to the configuration part. For configuration, we firstly need to configure the basics for the GitHub user. So basically, we are going to configure the username and the email ID in order to link our machine to the remote account. So for that, simply head up to your start and search for Git Bash. You can also do this through Windows Terminal, but since we have installed Git, why not make use of it? So once on your Git Bash, the command you need to use is git config global, and then you have to put the username, user.name, and then within string quotations, write in your GitHub username. Done. Now similarly associate your email ID. And that's it. We are done setting up the username and the email ID. So basically our Git has been configured to work with this particular GitHub account. If you would like to see the details that have been added to your machine, just head up to your drive C, users, head up to the user folder that you are using, and there you'll find a file named git config. You can open it up with any text editor, suppose VS Code, And there you will get to see all the basics that you have configured just now, the username and the user email. So that's it. We have configured the Git basics. You can close it off and you can initialize the default branch as main or master. It's up to you. And you can use this particular line, git config global list, in order to check a list of all the accounts and user IDs that you have associated with your machine. This will basically list all that data which we saw in this file. So that's it. We are done for configuration of Git. Now we are going to link our repository to our system folder. So here the first requirement is to create a new repository. That we have already done. Our repository is ready. The repository name is Java. And the same is present here. We have a folder named Java, which we would like to connect to our repository. So for that, we'll have to open this folder up on VS Code. And here in this folder, you can see I just have one program file. So you basically need to work with your terminal. On your terminal, first step is to initialize an empty Git repository. So for that, we do git init, and there you get initialized empty Git repository in the defined directory. Now, if you head back to this particular folder and enable to view hidden files, so you will get the folder .git. This is where all your content for that repository is going to be stored. So after initializing an empty Git, you need to add the content that's present on your folder. So for adding, we do git add, and then you need to put the name of the file that you would like to add with the file extension, or in case you want to add all the files, just put a single dot. And once we hit add, after doing git add all, this file has got green and it is getting an A sign. That means index has been added. It just has been added, it has not yet been confirmed. After adding the file, the next step is to provide a commit message. So you will do git commit -m for message and then string quotes your commit message. Hit enter, and then you see one file changed, 7 inserted. So now it's no longer green. It has been pushed to your .git folder. So basically this folder has now obtained a copy of this file, but it is still on your local machine. It has not yet been pushed on the repository that you created. So for that, we'll have to add the repository where we want to push this content. So for that, the command goes git remote add origin and then the URL of the repository that you want to add. So we'll do git commit add origin and then the URL of the repository that you wish to add. Simply head up to the address bar, copy and then paste. Hit enter. My bad, it would be git remote add origin and then paste the URL, hit enter, and that's it. This basically connects your remote location, that is this repository, to your local location, that is this folder. So these both have been connected. You just need to connect them once for each repository. Since we have connected this particular repository once, now we can keep coding on it unlimited number of times until and unless we start working with a different project. So after connecting the remote and the local repositories, you basically need to push. So for that, we go git push. And since this is the first time we are making any push to that repository, we'll have to add -u space origin and then the name of the branch. Since we did not add any readme file, we cannot do main. If we try doing main, it will throw up an error. But if I put in the same line of code, but I change the branch name to master, it is asking me to sign in to my GitHub. So I'll simply sign in through my browser. That's it, GitHub token authorized, and you can see after origin master, it asked me to complete my authentication in my browser. Once done, it compressed all the files. Basically, there were 2 files. It wrote those files, total 3 files, and then it was pushed where to this particular location. You can control click, it would open that URL in a new tab on your default browser. And now you can see that the file that we pushed has been pushed to our repository remotely. Here it's showing blank, but if I refresh, it shows the first file that I have pushed. So yes, that's really simple. That's all you have to do for pushing the files to your repository through the command line. Now, in case I create here more files, and let's keep the content same for both of them. So Since prog1 has already been pushed, it is not showing any changes, but prog2 is a new file. Therefore, you are getting it green and you have U. U stands for untracked. Untracked basically means that it has not yet been added to the local repository. Step 1, add to local repository. Step 2, commit message. Step 3, push. And that's how you push your content from your local repository to the remote repository. So since this is a new file, we want to add it to our repository, but this file is already present. So we'll just add one single file. So for that, we do git add and then file name. It has been added. Now it shows A. Now we need to give it a commit message. Git commit -m commit message, suppose commit 2. Enter one file change, 7 insertions. That's it. Now we'll go and push it to the repository. So for that, git push origin master, and that's it. So we need not add -u before the branch name. This is only to be done for the first time. So that's it, how you are supposed to add files. And now if I refresh the repository, file 2 has been added with the new commit message. So that's it. It's really simple to push your files to the repository. Now you no longer need to go to add file, upload files, and then simply manually drag and drop all the files that you wish to add. You can get it done through few lines of code through the command line. Okay, so if you are coding in Java, a class file is generated each time you run a code. So for prog1, we have prog1.class. For prog2, we have prog2.class. So both the class files have been generated, and since class files are new, they have not yet been pushed to the repository, they appear with a U sign. But is it actually necessary to push your class files to your repository? Since these are in the machine language, you cannot use it. User can't read it, machine cannot understand this, at least from the operating system's end. So what we can do is that we can do a setup where all the .class files or the files with this particular extension will be ignored. Basically, whatever file we create in here, suppose program3.java, and I'm putting in the same content of code. So I want the program3.java to be pushed up to my repo, but class files to be ignored. So for that, we'll add a git ignore file. So just create a new file called .git ignore. And here we basically want to exclude all the .class files. So for all, we use star and then we'll give the file extension. That's .class. Control S, file has been saved. So we just need to send this git ignore file to our repository, and then the mentioned class files will get ignored. So this file is present here and you can see they have grayed out, which means yes, now if we try to push all the content, it will ignore these files. So firstly, we'll have to push the git ignore file individually, only then it will work properly. So we'll do the same, git add git ignore. Git ignore file has been added and it shows as A. Git commit -m add git ignore file, git push origin master. And with that, our git ignore file will be pushed to our GitHub repository, which will now help to ignore all the class files. So now if I head up and try to add all the files present in this folder, git add all. So now this file has got an index added, but these two files are still ignored. Let me just push it to the repository and then show you. So I have pushed all the content from this folder, and now if we reload the repository, you can see only this file has been added. The files that we mentioned in git ignore are being ignored. You can do this for Java, you can do this for C, and you can also do this for any file extension or file type that you wish to ignore from your repository folder. So that's all the basics you need to know for setting up Git on your machine, and then start pushing up content from your local repository to the remote repository. Hope you found this helpful and interesting. If facing any issues, I'll drop a link to this repository where I have mentioned all the basic commands, installation, configuration, and setting up the first repository. In our next video, we'll try to cover up SSH, what it is and how it works. I'll explain it up there itself. So that's all for this video. Thanks for watching.